Would we have been better off not playing Clemson last year and playing another SEC game to make 9 games in the SEC? How would that have been better for the SEC? How would that have been better for Georgia? I don't think it would have. I think those teams you play outside your conference verify your strength. That was Kirby Smart in Florida last month talking about 8-game schedule, 9-game schedule in the SEC, and all these other schedules that are kind of being thrown out there, out and about in college football world. And look, it's Georgia's not yet lost games like that to start the season under Kirby Smart. When you think about the game with North Carolina, they've opened with Clemson twice, Oregon, essentially Notre Dame at the beginning of the 19 and 17 seasons. So it's been a consistent theme for Georgia. They would have opened up against Virginia in 2020, but that game got canceled because of COVID. Long story short. So does it make sense to really criticize the SEC for not playing the 9-game schedule when teams like Georgia are going out and playing Georgia Tech every season, playing Clemson, playing Oregon, playing North Carolina, playing Virginia a season ago? They've got Florida State scheduled in the near future, Clemson scheduled in the near future, Ohio State scheduled in the near future. I think the criticism of teams not playing anybody, that's kind of gone by the wayside since the SEC sort of mandated that their teams needed to play a legitimate out-of-conference team every single season. Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, they already had that. Kentucky, they already had that. Some of the other schools didn't. Alabama did a pretty good job on that front for a long time, but it wasn't always every season. There were schools that were playing 8 SEC games and 4 gimme schools. And that's just not a good thing. But again, back to what Kirby's saying, would we have been better off not playing Clemson last year and adding another SEC game to make 9 games? I would say probably not. Now, he's saying, he didn't think that would have been the case, that it wouldn't have been a better thing for Georgia to play Arkansas, Texas A&M, I don't even know whoever it would have been, or Vanderbilt, would it have made more sense for them to play that conference game versus playing the opener against Clemson? I don't think so. I think that one of the challenging parts of college football as we move forward into this new era, okay, is making sure that we still see teams from different parts of the country play one another. Not that long ago, we saw Wisconsin and Alabama. We've seen Georgia play Colorado, Arizona State, Boise, Oregon. All these different schools, North Carolina, Clemson, obviously, Georgia Tech every single season. We've seen those games, and in a playoff world, I think that those games are even more intriguing. As time goes on here, what will be curious to me is, will the SEC and the Big Ten get into a grouping where the two of them play one another to start the season, maybe game 1 or game 2, and then they kind of get into conference play. At the beginning of the division split, Georgia in 1992, 3, 4, and so forth, they often opened up a legitimate season against South Carolina. Like, that's who they would open up against. It's wild. That was wild if you think about it. And then they would play Tennessee a week later. They got away from that, probably smartly, but Carolina was usually the second game. Now they don't play South Carolina every season. So it's what is appropriate for the time. But I think it is good to play those, non-conference games in lieu of the 9th game, because what is the value of the 9th game? Certainly not money right now. Speaking of money, I got a great deal for you. Get our 2025 season preview included when you buy Dawg Post right now today. I'm going to put the link down below. You're getting 1 month. You're getting 3 months for the price of 1 month, and you get our 2025 preview. Easy enough for me to say. Make sure that you're taking advantage of this offer. It's not going to be going on forever. When we run out of magazines, we run out of magazines. And it's been pretty steady in terms of the magazine bunch. I'm going to tell you when the time is getting real thin, but take advantage of this right now. A lot of people already have 3 months of Dawg Post for the price of 1, and you get the 2025 preview. It's a great deal. The link is down below. For Georgia, playing Florida and Jacksonville every year sort of complicates things, and it makes things complicated for Florida too, to be honest. So those two schools have to balance that out, but because they're not having that extra home game. But just this is just me. I think Texas, Oklahoma, I think that's a sexy game. I think when you talk about Georgia, Oregon, that's a sexy game. Georgia, Clemson at the beginning of the 21 season certainly was a huge game up in Charlotte. Anytime, what would be very curious is to see Georgia, Penn State in, Atlanta or Charlotte or wherever. That would be fun. But I don't think you got to have 9 games. I think just because the Big Ten and the Big 12 have done 9 games, I would say so what to that. I mean, the Big 12 is not really the peer of the SEC by any stretch. So I don't think that's you shouldn't be guarding yourself against what does the Big 12 do. The Big 10 has made an effort to play the 9th game, but in all reality, the Big 10 often does not go out of its comfort zone to play. All Big 10 rivalry games at the end of the season are in the conference. That's not the case in the SEC in many cases. As it relates to USC playing Notre Dame, that's something that the Big 10 inherited. But I think if you're Georgia, it would be they canceled the UCLA thing. That I think was a reaction to where we are in college football right now and not knowing what the playoff is going to be like. But I think if you're the SEC, if you're Georgia, you don't have to do anything. I think if an 8-game schedule fits your conference, there should not be an apology tour about it. If the Big Ten is the dominant conference and, yada, 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 then, hey, all glory and power to them. The problem is the last 25 years, in other words, this century, that's not been the case. You've only seen 2 schools in that league win a national championship in Michigan and Ohio State. We've seen 3 schools in the last 7 years win the national championship in the SEC. So, nevertheless, this decade you've had LSU, this century you've had Florida, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama. I mean, you get my point. So there's been no shortage of different national champions for this, league. So the SEC is doing it right. However, if there comes a time when things become, where we got to balance stuff up, where you start talking about, hey, everybody wants to go 9 conference game, everybody wants to go 1 big game out of conference, then that's fine. But again, that's not really balanced. Down here, you've got Tech in Georgia, you've got Clemson, Carolina, you've got Kentucky, Louisville, you've got Florida State. Penn State's not playing Pitt every year. Ohio State doesn't play. I don't even know, what the equivalent would be there. Those schools are all, Notre Dame's not playing in the Big Ten as like a crossover game or whatever. That's a very rare thing. So I don't know. I think that, when you start, this is all bubbling up from, Big Ten wants everybody to be at 9. Well, so? Doesn't mean that the SEC has to coalesce to what the Big Ten does. That's not how this works. They are different entities, different media partners, different businesses completely. And would we have been better off not playing Clemson last year and playing another SEC game to make 9 conference games? How would that have been better for the SEC? It would have been better. How would it have been better for Georgia? I don't think it would have. I think those teams you play outside of your conference verify your strength. They certainly verify your strength. We saw that in the college football playoff. We saw that in, Clemson won the ACC and lost to 2 SEC schools. They got blown out by Georgia. Would SMU have fared any better? No. I really don't. know what else to say about it. I mean, you had there's no reason to capitulate to what everyone else wants without things making sense for you. And frankly, Georgia's played Clemson 50 plus times. That's an important game. It's not a rivalry in the sense of the Georgia, Florida, or Tech or Auburn, but it's an important game. You know, Ohio State doesn't play Notre Dame every year. They don't. They're not. Or every. Georgia's played Clemson like 4, 5. Is it 4 times in the last 10 years or 5 or whatever it is? They played each other a lot. Who's Ohio State played 5 times in the last decade or 4, whatever it is? Who's Michigan played 4 times in the last? It's not as common, particularly now that they're playing 9 games in the league. So what difference does it make? If you're like Auburn's opening up with Baylor, is that just as good as playing South Carolina? I mean, I don't know. I think there's no reason to move if you're the SEC right now unless you have to, and they don't.